Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the TRI Meteor. So the Meteor is TRI's brand new hybrid. It is a 1+1, so that's a 10mm beryllium dynamic driver paired with a Knowles ED29689 balanced armature. So first, before we begin, I do want to thank Keep Hi-Fi for sending this one to me. Many thanks for sending me review units through the course of the year, and it is 2 days away from Black Friday, and they are having a sale, so do check them out on Black Friday or whenever you get around to shopping for IEMs. So the Meteor, as I said, it is a 1+1. The shell itself is actually quite an attractive black resin. The pattern on it was supposed to evoke, almost star trails or meteor trails, meteor tails, comet tails, something along those lines. The back of it is a slightly translucent. You can kind of see what's going on in there if you look really closely or have a lot of light. But I think the main design element was this new faceplate with these little star trails. So this is not the standard stock cable. This is a sort of customized nice HCK C41 twisted. So that's 4 cores in a fabric sleeve. The stock cable itself, the one that ships with it, is this attractive black 8-core, and it also has black hardware. So actually a nice cable in 3.5mm. I tend to use 2.5mm, so that's why I use the balance cable. It also does come with the standard TRI case, which KB here also has a very similar one with just a different logo. The box is kind of large. It looks like that. And it does come with a set of tips, which are those guys. And if you've purchased a recent KB ear set or TRI set, you'll end up with a similar set to that. I think it's actually the KB07 ear tip set. So let's kind of jump into it. And so as the title suggests, rock solid. It is very much a well-tuned, coherent 1+1 hybrid. Balanced is a word that I'm going to say 10 or 12 times. Harman, safe, fun, $100 set. So when I think of a $100 set, coming from your typical $30 to $50 budget set, which may be a little overly V-shaped, this is what you kind of evokes that $100 set. This finer, refined tuning, 2 drivers that are very coherent, well paired, a little higher quality driver than you might get in a budget set. But, this one actually does, tuning wise, sound wise, hardware wise, it does evoke this $100 price range. So I think they pretty much nailed that with the price. So that is good. But, rock solid. I think there's not too many flaws in this one. There's not too many things to poke at. It's just a very safe, well-tuned, nice sounding set. So congrats to TRI on this one. So it is a bit warm. So do try open tips. Do try neutral sources. So I have a TRI TK2, which I'll talk about in a second. But tips-wise, I think I actually am using the standard tip, which is the yellow, the biggest one, and it is a bit wide. And I think that just works better with warm sources, especially for me. There's plenty of bass here, and I don't see too much of a point in adding bassier tips that just emphasize that. I think the bass level, they've kind of got it right. So I do look for a wider tip, especially on these warmer sets like this. And neutral source would actually kind of be along the same lines as that. So more power is better bass, and this one definitely does tightens up quite a bit with more power. And for those of you who may have seen this one advertised, I think I actually poked at it when I was doing the Meteor preview. So this is the TRI TK2. It is both a DAC and a headphone amplifier. It's dual ESS DAC, and it's got a super lots of power amplifier. So if you're using a typical dongle or maybe even a Q5K that maxes out at about 300 milliwatts, this is about 1000. So Very much a fingerprint magnet, but super beefy. It's actually, the screen protector is still on it, so don't worry about it. It's not that scratched up. It's just the plastic protector. But the top is glass, and that's a bit concerning. And I will do a more fuller, bigger review of this guy, but I have been using it nearly every day, and it will probably take over music playback from my Key 5K. It's definitely a step up from that. I mean, not only in power, but overall sound. It's quite a bump up, bump up in price as well. But very happy with the TK2 so far. So on the Meteor, it does more power, better bass. Everything sounds just a little bit better, and I think it is an easy to drive set, sort of. It works, but it works much better at higher power. So I do suggest using a little higher power source on the Meteor. I think it does sound a lot better than straight out of your phone. So sound-wise, it is a bassy U-shape that balances performance and fun very well. And so, as I said, it was sort of harmonish, if we get a better look at this. So you can kind of see the Harmon curve is that dotted line, and it does peek through in certain areas. So the bass level just a tad lower. Harmon is just probably a little cleaner right here, and then the rise is just a little more relaxed, and then the rest of it kind of goes in and out of Harmon. And so you can kind of see the two areas where I said that, generally it's pretty much right on, and then there's sort of maybe these areas out here where it's going to need a little more extension in the sub bass, and then right about here at about 12.6, I think is about right there, just for air. The rest of it in between the two is actually quite fine. Just the, poking at the two ends, I think doesn't fix it. It just simply makes it sound better than it already is, which I don't really have a problem with that. So the bass, like I said, there's a little sub bass roll off, and it can be remedied with a +4 decibel at 41 hertz. So many thanks to Larry Fulton. He did a review a few days ago and came up with some PEQ settings for the Meteor. So one is bringing out the extension on the sub bass at 41 hertz, and the other one is down here, so at 12.6 +4 for air. So many thanks to him for putting those out there, because I tried them and used them, and I think I like those settings a little bit more. The +4, maybe that's 3 or 2. +4 is pretty much well extended, but it does add a little bit more bass there. So definitely try 4 and then ratchet it down if it's a little bit too much for you. And the focus, that sub bass focus, it's not quite. It's a little bit deceptive, where you think it's way out here, but it's not quite there. And I think part of this is I'm not sure that my coupler is really grabbing that end point of where it is and how it seems to go up like that. I'm not sure it really does. I think it definitely does roll off. And when you put in +4 there and hear it extend all the way out, you kind of realize what's happening. So yeah, it's not, I wouldn't call it a super punchy mid-bass, hard-hitting focus. It's definitely a little deeper than that, but not quite at the very low rumbling focus. So definitely tightens up with power, as I said, and it still really balances this deep, rich textured bass, but not super fast. It's definitely not that style bass. It leans more fun than quick and tight and fast, but I'll call it fast enough. It's just not super fast. So, or more relaxed bass to go with that relaxed treble. I think the two pair fine in that way. They're both not quite ratcheted up too much. They're paired at this relaxed level, and I think they did a good job, at both sides on that. So R Plus, Love Will Tear Us Apart, is a cover of a really cool Joy Division song. R Plus is more of an electronic dance version of that song, but when you hear that thumping bass right in the beginning, it kind of sounds like a subwoofer, and then you put the EQ on it and you get that last bit at the end. And as soon as I tried the EQ settings on that song, it kind of like, oh, that's the part that's actually missing. And you'll hear it kind of right away, just that last bit at the end. So not a huge difference, but it's there if you want that last bit of sub bass. So mids, U-shaped. It's very much kind of this Harmon drop down, don't carry too much energy into the bass, keep it quite clean. And I think that is very much what happens here, is U-shaped tuning, and it balances this clarity and cleanliness with having plenty of note weight and definition and richness. You know, again, it's this balance of giving you enough richness to the sound without being too lean, without being too lightweight, plenty of definition, plenty of texture, rich, smooth, but not smoothed over, detailed, texture, dynamic, natural, lots of adjectives to describe mids that are actually quite good. And I think they did a really good job on the mids. And you can just look at the graph and you're like, oh, these are, going to be pretty good, and they sound just like they look on the graph. So separation, plenty of separation in the mids. There's a lot of nice upper range to add in a lot of nice sparkle and detail to instruments. Everything keeps separated, but at the same time paired very well to that lower end dynamic driver. That beryllium dynamic driver has got plenty of bass, and it does seamlessly fit without really bleeding too hard into the mids at all. It's actually quite clean, so it pairs well with the bass. Sometimes it sounds quite real, and then sometimes it sounds just too forward for me. And I don't know if it's actually that device, but the vocals, if you keep on ratcheting up the volume too much, they will get in between your ears a little too close to you. The intimacy has gotten a little bit too close for me. Like even on Adele's new album, there's some points of that where if your volume is too high, she's way too close to you, and it just feels a little better pushing back the vocals a little bit more. So turn down the volume a little bit, and you do get a little bit of this V-shaped, almost recessed mids. The lower your volume goes, it tends to push things back a little bit. So do that if you feel things are a little too close to you. So Trip the Witch, Saturn We Miss You. So one of those songs that gets kind of stuck in my head, and I always listen to it on every new set. And very, very much right in the beginning, I'm always listening to how clean things are, how much texture there is, how these lower sounds are actually mixing together and staying separated. And it does a really good job. Lots of lower mid separation, and it's detailed and textured and rich, and it sounds the way it should. And then you switch to something like Adele's Hello, and one, does it sound like Adele? Is there too much BA tonality to it? Is her voice shifted too high? And you don't really get any of those. It's actually quite nice version of Adele. And then as she goes into that chorus and really starts belting it out, does it still remain controlled? Does it get harsh, sibilant, all those things? And it really does stay quite controlled and smooth even through those parts. So like I said, there's not too much to poke at with the mids. It's solid. So treble, again, balances that treble level with coherency, making sure it pairs well with the dynamic driver, stay non-fatiguing, stay natural, provide enough detail. So Go-Go Penguin, Signal and Noise, the drum's a bit too thumping, and that's when I go back to this 4 decibel. So I think 4 decibels is probably too much for me, especially on that track. So 3 or 2 is probably better. I think the drums are just thumping a bit too much, but they're still not crushing the piano or the bass. It's still separated, but still a little bit too much for me. The snares crack and the cymbals are a bit thin, is how I would describe it. Not necessarily metallic, but not as rich as they should be. And then in the last 30 seconds, you lose a little bit of that speed. It could just be used a little bit more. It doesn't stay as clean as it should, because in that last 30 seconds, all the instruments are going at quite a fast rate, and pulling off that section is a little more difficult with just a one-on-one. So, but just really nitpicking is really what I'm doing there. So as I said, EQ 12.6 at 4 decibels. If you like a little more air, that's really the little bit that's sort of missing way out here. So 12.6 is about right there. So do poke that in if you like a little more air. I don't necessarily notice that as much as I did on the sub bass, but if you really want to hear those last bits of notes and treble roll off, do that. So stage and imaging, I think is just wide enough. It could definitely be wider. Probably the third criticism I would have, other than the sub bass roll off and the treble roll off, I think the stage width is just wide enough, is what I would say. It definitely loses height and depth sometimes, and like I said, with the volume, sometimes it just gets too close to you and there's no depth. Sometimes there's no height. Sometimes there's plenty of height. So I think it's just rather inconsistent. But when it nails it, it nails it, and when it doesn't, it's like, it's okay. It's kind of average, but imaging is always good, and the U-shape keeps it really clean, and that upper range separation. I think all those things add to a $100 sound, but I would still say it would be better with a wider space. So that's about all I got on the Meteor. Again, thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.